There's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to vehicle utilization rates, but it's often best to keep it simple. One great place to start is with the ebook, The Ultimate Guide to Vehicle Utilization and Right-Sizing Fleet, that Agile Fleet created in conjunction with NAFA.
The utilization needs to be specific to the individual fleet and the mission that you're trying to serve. If you want to look at utilization and then sort of drill into that a little bit and use your utilization metrics to help you improve the usage of your fleet, well, what we find is that a lot of fleets tend to get overwhelmed by the concept of how do I address this need? Sometimes it's best really just to keep it simple. All right, if the fleet is parked in your facility, perhaps outside your office, maybe it's best just to stand up a few times a day and look out your window and see what the usage of the fleet might be. If you want to go old school, you could actually walk out there and put a penny under a tire or chalk a tire just to see which vehicles are moving. But if once you get a sense of, if this is something that needs to be addressed, the goal is to really start somewhere. You might look at your fleet management information system, if you have one, to get some sense of the trends of when vehicles are leaving and when vehicles are returning. Many fleets, have sort of a monthly minimum mileage goal. That might be 600, 800, 1,000 miles a month. And therefore, if the vehicle's not traveling that distance, that vehicle really may be underutilized and possibly needs to be reassigned. But when looking at activity and usage of vehicles, oftentimes it's best to keep it simple. That might be looking at really the percentage of vehicles that might be driven during a given time period. It might be a day, it could be a week. Perhaps if you're sharing vehicles or using vehicles for working in construction, it might be how often that vehicle goes out to a job site or how many trips are actually taken by that vehicle on a day-by-day basis. So by looking at utilization earlier, you may have found that you had strategically located vehicles that are grouped together that weren't moving sufficiently to justify keeping them in place. Well, by sharing those vehicles across the broader organization, you can obviously reduce cost because you don't necessarily have to have as many vehicles. Because you have less vehicles, potentially you can put in place newer vehicles, better vehicles, cleaner vehicles, vehicles with more safety features. If you happen to know someone in the accounting department or in HR that's responsible for managing personal mileage reimbursement, that's someone really worth seeking out. Because if you look at how much you're spending on vehicles that are being reimbursed for employees' personal vehicles, there might be a great opportunity to put those people into a company or an organization provided vehicle, which is obviously going to be a whole lot less expensive than paying upwards of 60 cents per mile, your fuel management system, and look at some of the mileage reports so you can determine which vehicles are being used on a regular basis and which aren't. If you have a GPS system, obviously there's robust reporting in GPS systems that you can use to track when vehicles are moving and how often they're moving. At the end of the day, if you sort of pushed me into a corner and said, what's a good utilization rate? I'd have to say that striving for 80% is sort of an aspiration would be a reasonable goal. If utilization is really something you're interested in learning more about, Agile was fortunate enough to work with NAFA last year in developing the ultimate guide to vehicle utilization and right-sizing fleet. And that document, it's an ebook, is available through NAFA, or it can be downloaded from the resource section of the Agile Fleet website.